Hello, my name is Dale DuFay, and I'm going to use Google Earth here as a backdrop and pose pictures and things as this video goes along. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about Jehovah's Witnesses and my experience with them. There's a couple things I didn't mention in the last video I wanted to go over. A couple of them about their beliefs that usually isn't mentioned much. Or I didn't mention it in the previous video. So we'll just call this, Jehovah's Witnesses exposed, unholy hypocrites. Now, the reason I say that is because to me that's the biggest thing, biggest sin that they committed and overshadows everything else is a mere fact of being hypocrites, proclaiming to be this one and only true religion. And behind everybody's back, their parishioners, because their parishioners are innocent of all this. In fact, some of them are victims. And to cover up the sexual abuse like they did is unprecedented, and it's inexcusable. And I was no doubt, I always got along with the elders and my congregation just fine. I worked at their houses because I do construction work. So I worked at their houses. In fact, I even did a basement for one of them, and they had me build a room, secure room with the lock and and everything, and then even soundproofed it to some extent. And they made a big deal about it so they can have their quote unquote secret meetings. And I remember the wife even saying that they always have their secret meetings and we can never know what they're talking about. I wish I could be the fly on the wall and this and that. But after that expose the other night on Vice TV, which was extraordinary, I know why they needed that and what that was all about. They were covering up pedophiles, harboring pedophiles, covering up sexual abuse allegations. Those kind of things should go directly to the law authorities. And that's the real big thing about the Jehovah's Witnesses is they always tell their parishioners to obey the law in every way. I mean, pay your taxes. Don't go over the speed limit when you're driving. This and that. Obey the law. Obey the law. In fact, they've accumulated such tremendous wealth. It's beyond our comprehension, because they're in the belief that the government's going to ask for back taxes, because of course all religions are exempt from taxes. So they have all that money. This is how law-abiding they claim to be. In case that certain inevitability arrives, then they'll have the funds to pay them, and no other religion would be able to, thus leaving them as the sole survivor. Then it's hilarious. So again, they're disobeying the law in one of the greatest areas there could possibly be: sexual abuse on children. People in their congregation having sex with young children. There's nothing worse, and they were covering this up there by disobeying the law. In one of the biggest laws. It just doesn't get. To me, that's actually worse than murder, when it's something like that. And they're covering it up, and they have been ever since, God, who knows how long this has been going on. Certainly, I remember in the early 60s in the Naperville congregation in Naperville, Illinois, it was a, young congregation, and my grandmother was a pioneer there. She was a lifelong dedicated witness and a pioneer her entire life. She pretty near created that congregation, but yet had no privileges whatsoever being a woman. That's another thing about the organization. The women do all the work, but they have no privileges other than that whatsoever. Literally no privileges whatsoever. In fact, if there's a group of only sisters that are going out in the ministry, and there's no brothers amongst the group, then one of the sisters has to take control, and that's the only time they have privileges. And even then, they have to wear a hat because of the headship rule. Crazy things like that. But my grandmother was, so devoted in it. And I remember when she got disfellowshipped, it was just, it broke her heart. It ripped it to shreds. And she died not long after that. But again, it must have been horrible for her, all the work she did. And they disfellowshipped her for some erroneous reason. It was ridiculous. But that was a Naperville congregation. That congregation got so corrupt that the governing body had to visit it a couple times. It was, that bad. So that should have all been red flags for me. And then staying on what my grandmother, being a devoted Jehovah's Witness, that was always a problem for our family, my siblings and I, at school. Because she would take it upon herself to go to the principal of any schools we were attending and let them know that we were Jehovah's Witnesses and that we were not going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. That's another thing they don't do. They don't do anything with the flag or pledge allegiance or anything. So that right away made school life miserable for all of us. I remember my elementary principal in Mill Street School in Naperville, Illinois, hated me so much that he would, one time I entered the school with my shirt untucked, and he pushed me into the vestibule through the double doors and proceeded to kick the crap out of me. And that was one of many times he did that. And that's because my grandmother was a Jehovah's Witness. I mean, that's what's terrible about that. And then there's this fellowshipping and family members who couldn't talk to it. I mean, the religion basically dictated and ruined our family in many ways. And of course, the disfellowshipping of my grandmother broke her heart. And she eventually died from cancer and everything. But the thing is I remember how horrible it broke her heart, but yet she kept diligently reading the Bible and praying and everything. But that's what they do. They don't shun you per se, but they disfellowship you. But you can return. But it's a very humiliating process where you have to go to the meetings and nobody can talk to you. So I went through that. I mentioned in the first video about that. 30 years with being disfellowshipped and then returning. And that was like a 3-month humiliating process of going to meetings and not being able to talk to anybody, and everybody there knowing that nobody can talk to you because you're disfellowshipped. And then eventually I got reinstated, which was good because I got to spend time with my 2 sisters who are still Jehovah's Witnesses that I hadn't seen in 30 years. So that was wonderful. I mainly did it for that reason. And then I was very glad I officially left the religion about 3 years ago here in Southwest Michigan. And I was at Paw Paw at the time, and the elders came up to my apartment, and one of them was an elderly man. He could barely make it up the steps, but they were trying to convince me otherwise because I dropped a letter off at the congregation in Paw Paw, which I went to a couple meetings, and that congregation was a joke. But anyway, I officially got out of it, and I felt really good about it. I remember my soul was so relieved when I did that. I felt like I got rid of a satanic organization. And speaking of soul, that's another thing, very big thing about the witnesses that you don't hear too often, but it's a big deal. They say that nobody has a soul. Only persons, the only human beings on earth that have souls, which is ridiculous because of course we have a soul. Our soul is eternal. It's incredible. It's what makes us who we are. But they tell us we don't have a soul. Doesn't that remind you? I'm trying to think of that group of demon forces that some of the first century Christians, Gnostic groups, really warned about. The name escapes me, but they would influence people and telling them they don't have souls. But nothing could be further from the truth. But that's the thing that really got me, even while I was an active witness, a publisher, they call you a minister, if you will. But anyway, that's the big thing that, that most people don't talk about is they tell you you don't have a soul. And only the anointed, they call them, the 144,000, they're the only ones that have souls. And that's how they can tell they're one of the 44,000. It could be anybody. It could be a sister, any individual in the congregation. In fact, on once a year during the memorial of Christ, basically the Passover, and that's the one thing that impressed me is they were the only Christian religion that celebrated the Passover, because Jesus commanded us to remember that day. So they really do. But that's the time only those that are anointed could partake of the bread and wine. So if the bread and wine was passed at every congregation on a memorial every year, which is a different date because the Jews during Passover, the Hebrews used lunar calendar, so it was Nisan 14th was the lunar month of Nisan, and the 14th day was Passover. So they, but again, only they would pass the the bread and the wine at every congregation, and everybody just passed it on to the next person because you weren't allowed to partake because you don't have a soul. You're not a part of the anointed. Only the 144,000. But here's the thing. You could tell they are wrong about that doctrine big time because they keep track of who partakes every year. Now, if you would think the 144,000, and that's the thing, they believe the 144,000 is a limited number of privileged individuals who could partake of the anointed and who are going to rule as princes and princesses with Jesus Christ during the 1,000-year reign. But here's the thing: every memorial, more and more and more, the number gets higher and higher of those who partake. It's in the thousands now. Their belief is ever since the first century that number count started. So being a finite number, it should have been filled by now, according to their beliefs, long ago. So why is that count of those who partake and claim to be of the 144,000 rise every year? They have no answer for that. Well, to me, that's a big red flag that they're totally wrong about the 144,000. I believe personally about that the 144,000 are being chosen and sealed right now as we speak, and they're living human beings. They are not people who lived in the past, and Christians, and not even the apostles or the disciples of Jesus are not of that count. It's happening right now, and the people who least suspect it are going to be the ones that are chosen. That's basically the thing. If anybody's going around like the Jehovah's Witnesses claiming they're one of the 144,000, well, right there automatically you're not, and that's the way it works. It's not that simple. But their dogma about the soul was just a bad one. And then the other thing I didn't mention in the other video about their beliefs is the holidays. You can't have any holiday celebrations and everything. And of course, that was a time when my parents, okay, we're Jehovah's Witnesses, we can't celebrate Christmas, and your birthday, even though they did for the most part sometimes. I shouldn't say sometimes, for the most part, but when it was ever in their convenience, and they didn't want to go through that, they would, we can't celebrate, we're not supposed to, like the blood issue, you're not supposed to take blood, and things like that. What's bad is it separates you and makes you stand out. And another thing you can't do is you can't, like if you're at a party or something, or at an office party or something like that, and somebody makes a toast, you can't even do that. You can't even, cheers and things like that. And it's so ridiculous, And another thing is, like, when somebody sneezes, you can't say bless you or anything. It's hilarious. I remember I had a Bible study from my ministries, and I had developed a Bible study, and it was real regular. So the circuit overseer who was somebody like Paul, Apostle Paul. He would visit all the congregations. So during one of his visits at our congregation, I invited it to my Bible study. And once you know it, the Bible study student sneezed. Or no, what it was is, the circuit overseer sneezed. And once you know it, and then naturally, the Bible students like, oh, Kazunta, or God bless you, and the circuit overseer didn't respond at all. It was a very awkward moment for both the student and myself. I mean, regardless of your beliefs, at least say, oh, thank you, it's no big deal anyway, really, So I had to find myself explaining to the Bible student, why he did that, and why we believe that and this and that. And it's very awkward and stupid. But that's the Jehovah's Witnesses for you. And most of the parishioners, for the most part, are very devout. And, and a lot of them aren't. And then another thing, too, is the hierarchy. There's this hierarchy. If you're a brother and you're not a ministerial servant, then you're looked upon as like, wow, you must have done something wrong. You're not a good brother, blah, blah, blah. And believe me, it's very difficult, especially now, to become a ministerial servant, let alone an elder. So if you're a brother without any, just a publisher, if you will, then you're looked upon with, some sort of, like, what did you do wrong? I mean, there's always that hierarchy. I didn't like that. Although I did always take part in any, participating in anything, building kingdom halls and working at assembly centers and doing everything I could, other than sit there and listen to the same thing over and over and over, because that's what they do. I mean, you're little sheep, they have no business, they have no problem telling you you're just a sheep. Act like one. So that's some of the difficulties I had growing up with that religion, and then being a part of it too, and then seeing a lot of what goes on with the elders, like building that secret room for them and things like that, and noticing that they do have secret meetings, and you're wondering who they're talking about and things like that. It's I look back now and see what that was all about. I just can't help but wonder, wow, who was molested and who was the pedophile in the congregation I attended, because most certainly it happened at every single one of them at one point or another. Apparently, it sounds like it. That sounds like, according to that expose on Vice TV about the Jehovah's Witnesses, it sounds like there's literally tens and thousands of cases that they hid. In fact, it's going to rival what's happened to the Catholic Church by tenfold. And that's why they're withholding the information. They're probably hoping for Armageddon to come and this will all go away. But I got news for them. Their goose is cooked. They have to release those papers, files, eventually. And when that'll be, who knows, when the fines tally into the tens of millions, I guess they're going to have to. It's already $2 million, according to the expose. At $2,000 a day, they ought to start fining them $20,000 a day, in my opinion. Because who are they? Again, they're disobeying the law by withholding court orders. That is the law, the highest law of the state of New York. And they are withholding. So breaking the law, and at the same time telling people, the parishioners, to obey the law. The organization they are unholy hypocrites, and shame on them. Because, like, again, with this, when I'm talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, unholy hypocrites, I'm talking about the organization, not the parishioners. I'm talking about the elders of the congregation, not the publishers. Because they're wonderful for the most part, very devout and devoted and righteous. But that's where the hypocrisy comes in. And it's very unholy. If you're going to use God's name on top of it all, and you're going to preach these doctrines and not even follow them, especially when it comes to having sex with children and hiding that just to keep your organization clean and righteous while you're doing the most grievous sin possible. That just trumps everything. Doesn't matter what other bad things they've done. Doesn't matter if their doctrines are outrageously ridiculous. All that aside, the biggest sin they committed was hypocrisy. They're one of the 7 congregations that Jesus talked about in Revelation. They're the congregation that Jesus vomited out. Think about that. And the witnesses, I guarantee, when that time comes, they actually preached at Babylon the Great. When Babylon the Great falls, that Babylon the Great refers to the religions of the world. So, they might be talking about their own fate. They may be right about that. Babylon the Great may represent them. I think about it. I remember when I recently left, I had a friend elder from the Elmhurst congregation in Elmhurst, Illinois, call me. He called me and said, Dale, it's the truth because we're the only ones that use God's name. And even at that point, I even said, well, yeah, therein lies the problem. What if you're all wrong? What if, in all along you're wrong, and on top of it all, using God's name. Now, if that isn't using God's name in vain, I don't know what else is. Really, shame on you, Jehovah's Witnesses, as an organization. The headquarters in New York, that has more money. They have more money than you can even imagine. My guess is in the billions, because they encourage parishioners to leave them their entire estate when they die. And they've had many, many extremely rich parishioners leave their, whole estate while the rest of the members of the family are going, what the heck? Can we have some? Oh no, they gave it all to Jehovah's organization, which is now extremely rich. They have a farm in New York that's incredible, and they have the best and most expensive high-tech equipment on that farm. They have trucks where the trailers of the trucks have moving floors, where they, the top of the line. They have the top of the line printing presses, top of the line software to translate their dogma throughout the world. In fact, one of their places that really get a lot of new, people involved. Is South America and Central America and Mexico. They're doing real good down there. They're building kingdom halls on a weekly basis, or at least they were before I left. So they have wealth beyond comprehension, and they're in Wallkill, New York now. I believe that's upper state, and the headquarters was in Manhattan, where they purchased huge buildings and property a long time ago. I don't want to say the date because I could be wrong, but a long, long time ago in Manhattan. Big buildings, massive, millions of square feet to handle the printing presses, to print out the watchtowers, everything, the books and literature. But they sold all of them. I think it was about 7 years ago. I want to say 2012, 2011 maybe. So maybe 10 years ago. But could you imagine what they got for those buildings? Especially since they left them in pristine condition, because that's how they are. They're even during conventions when they rent stadiums and things like that. they leave the place a lot better than the one they entered. You know, there's a lot of good things they do, but again, that's the parishioners. That's not the organization. But could you imagine what they got for that property? Those properties, they sold them all. They probably got hundreds of millions of dollars for it. And then they bought the huge property in Upper New York, Wallkill, and built an incredible headquarters. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I came 1 inch from working there. But thank God I didn't, because the questionnaire was ridiculous. I remember I even told the elder, I said, God, they expect you to be an angel, and I ain't going to lie on the questionnaire. I imagine everybody else lied on the questionnaire, because there were questions on there that not any human being couldn't answer no to. You know, did you ever look up pornographic stuff? You know, stuff like that. So that's what turned me off. But I'm sure had I lied on the application, I'd be there right now. But you know, thank God, I didn't feel right. I didn't feel obviously qualified to work there because I wasn't an angel, or I didn't have angel attributes. You know, I remember when I told the elder that, he was like, "No, it ain't that bad. Come on." And I was like, "Yeah, it is. I ain't gonna answer those questions, you know. So I ain't going there." And then shortly after that, I left. I acted. It's what they call turned inactive. I was inactive for about a year or so, until I notified officially the congregation in Paw Paw, Michigan, that I was leaving disassociating myself. So it's like that was my way of, you know, giving them up yours. So I was glad I did it. I can't talk to my sisters again anymore. That's the sad part about it. But again, blame the organization, the almighty, righteous, the best religious organization on the face of the earth. My ass. I always had a back feeling, about that deep in my head. I was like, God, what if these are, turns out to be the worst religion on the face of the earth? And here, I didn't even think so. Even when I left, I still thought that they were probably the best religion of all the Christian religions. But after seeing that expose, it was shocking. Just turns out they're all a bunch of hypocrites, and those nerds, those governing body, those nerds. That's all they are. They're ruling 7 million people. That's 0.01% of the population are Jehovah's Witnesses. 7 million. So when this comes out, the expose claimed in the next 3 years, this is all going to come out, and they are going to be revealed who they are, and that is, in my opinion, unholy hypocrites. Worse. They committed the worst sins that you can imagine. There's only a few that are worse, and murder's not one of them. This is what they did is worse than murder, ruining, wasting millions of lives, not to mention withholding, harboring pedophiles. That was bizarre. In the expose, one guy, ex-witness that was abused, went to a convention to see his mother. Hopefully she'd see his mother there. And he goes into the bathroom and runs into the guy, the pedophile, in his suit and tie and being a righteous, good little Christian. It's pretty sick how anybody can have that kind of morality and still go around and think that they are a true Christian and are going to be one of the few survivors of Armageddon. The 0.1% of the whole population of the earth that's going to survive after what he did. Instead of spending time in jail like he should have, he gets to go to conventions and run into his victims. That was bizarre to me. And of course, he didn't get to see his mother because his mother caught wind he was doing that, and she didn't even attend the convention because she can't see her son because he's disfellowshipped. Isn't it bizarre? how many families they've ruined, all because of a couple verses. How how you shouldn't, once you shouldn't eat bread with a person that's immoral, things like that. A couple of verses, boom, and of course the first century it was important, because the Christianity was just getting started. It's not that important in the 21st century. Move on. But it's their way of maintaining control. They have you. If you confess everything to them and what type of person you are, they got you. They got you by the short hairs. And luckily, I never told them any of my sins or what type of person I am. I never told them. I kept it from them. But boy, the elders were always trying. They were always trying to see what type of guy I was. And I never told them nothing, nor did I fill out that questionnaire, like I said, to work at the new world headquarters for the only true religion on the face of the earth. It was the Mandela Effect that got me to believe. This channel, I'm not going to talk too much about the Mandela Effect, but it was the Mandela Effect that helped me realize that there is no such thing as a one true religion. They're all good and they're all bad. And of course, one of the worst, it turns out to be, are the Jehovah's Witnesses. So anyway, thanks for watching, because this really does help me to talk about it. I wanted to talk about the fact that they don't believe in souls, and then what I went through in school and holidays aspect of it, things like that, and get a few things off my chest. Luckily, I was never abused as a child, because we used to go to the Kingdom Hall, but we weren't, baptized or anything, or my parents weren't that into it either, thank God. But my mom's mother was, like I said, she was a devout Jehovah's Witnesses, so we used to attend the meetings and stuff. But that kind of stuff was probably going on back then, back in the 60s. And we're keeping it secret. In the expose, that guy got some files, and it was a lot of files, and that was just from one or a few congregations. Could you imagine getting all the files, the secret files, that they've been harboring pedophiles from all their congregations, which the headquarters has, and that's what the courts are asking them to release. But they, if I wasn't mistaken, I think on the expose I heard that they had 25,000 congregations. It's way more than that, believe me. They have, 7 million parishioners. Do the math. I believe there's over, when I left, there was going on 250,000, and they was growing every day. Of course, the pandemic slowed it down and everything, I'm sure. But there was an incredible pace, and it was getting close to 250,000. So those files could stack from New York to the moon, probably. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it's probably as tall as one of those buildings that they sold and got millions of dollars for in Manhattan. It's probably could stack, if you stacked up every file on top of each other, probably be as tall as that building, or one of those buildings, especially that stupid one they had the watchtower on top of the word watchtower. And in the expose, they showed them taking it down, but it was making it look like the religion was going down. I thought that was great, but in reality, they were removing the sign because they took down, or because they sold the building and got millions of dollars for it. And keep in mind, they were extremely wealthy religious organization, even back in the 50s and 60s, even before that. And most certainly they've invested the money. Who knows what they do with it? All I know is I used to give them $75 a month. I feel like, I tried to call their headquarters. You get on their website, jw.org, and they got their phone number right there to their world headquarters. And I called them, and they answered it, and I demanded to talk to the governing body. And I was on hold for, it must have been like 10, 15 minutes, and I finally well, obviously I am not going to get anything, because they were naturally, when they answered the phone, it's a sister, a young sister. Hope she wasn't abused. But anyway, she's very friendly, and she asked my name, asked where I'm calling from, asked what it was about, and I told her. I told her everything: my name, address, also what I'm calling for. I said I saw that expose, and I demand to talk to the one of the governing body members, which you can do. I mean, I tried when I was first affected with the Mandela Effect. I'm still, it's a phenomenon. For those of you who don't know, it's a phenomenon where the name came from the fact that there was a lot of people who remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison. And obviously he didn't. He was liberated from prison and ascended to the presidency of South Africa. But millions of people remember him dying in prison. Some people remember him getting sick with the flu, which he did here, and this it happened. But he lived through it. But in some people remember him dying, and others remember him getting shot by a prison guard, and so on. So it's a thing where, that's revealing that we have multiple realities. Again, I'm not going to get into it too much on this channel. I'm just going to do stuff like this and show things that I work on, and models and stuff, and talk about other things. I have other YouTube channels, but this one I want to keep like this. And the other channels, I never talk about religion, because I hate organized religion, especially now more than ever. So anyway, I appreciate you watching, and we'll talk at you later. Love you.